I've been a Bitcoin journalist since 2014. I've been writing about Bitcoin for a really long time. I would say that having worked in that ecosystem, I start to understand the fabric behind why certain stories emerge and others don't. With all these changes we're talking about, the world reserve currency being Bitcoin, people working remote, people having more agency and the ability to determine, their economic agency and livelihood, we're going to see some really interesting results. And I'm hopeful that will mean that it will be much easier for individuals to be more sovereign. For Bitcoin and for other things, there are quite a few restrictions coming. So I can't speak to every country in the world, but let's just say Canada. The stablecoin demand that I've seen in Canada has been really, really weak. I've seen Coinbase try to bring Base around, and there's a couple cafes that you're just gonna see the value of a second citizenship or residency go up and up. And you've already started seeing this, by the way. Instead of thinking about money as a primary goal, and instead thinking about what are the things I want money to bring for me, Bitcoin helps with that lens because it totally reframes my thinking of money.
Before we get started with all the topics, maybe give the viewers and the listeners that haven't watched the first episode of us some background of who you are and why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, for sure. Last time we were on, was to talk about my book, Would Mao Hold Bitcoin in China. But I've been a Bitcoin journalist since 2014. I've been writing about Bitcoin for a really long time, and Bitcoin excites me for so many different reasons, but let me just focus on one. Let me do two. One is that I think it is the best option that we have for us in terms of a financial tool and a tool that helps you avoid control and surveillance. So I think that's number one. And then number two, Bitcoin really excites me because of the community, the people that we meet. Robin, you've been at all these events as well, and just love seeing you, love seeing other people, and just the community that's developing. And what I often tell people is the media ecosystem around Bitcoin is actually really interesting. It's quite contrarian. It's a different independent way of analyzing and looking at different events. And I think it's so important to have that because I've worked in the media, and we can talk about this a little bit too. And I would say that I've never been a staff writer or full-time writer, but I would say that having worked in that ecosystem, you start to understand the fabric behind why certain stories emerge and others don't.
Super interesting. Yeah, it's really, for me, interesting who resonates, because I see all the data. I have over 540 guests now on my podcast, and I see all the data of at some podcasts, people really stick a long time and really enjoy the episodes, some not. And sometimes it's when I enjoyed a lot, people click out quickly. And I was like, hey, I enjoyed that. Why is my audience not enjoying that? So it's really interesting, what topics are resonating, what the guests are resonating. And it's not always just number go up. Obviously, this usually helps. But this number go up thing is not the pure solution that people are searching for. And this is really interesting. I got yesterday a comment saying I saw the first 2 minutes and the rhythm on how he talked. I just enjoyed it so much. And I was like, this will be a good one. Just by the rhythm, how he talked. But yeah, it's really interesting, with media and what topics emerge. What is kind of interesting stories for you that you kind of see right now in the Bitcoin community, Bitcoin media kind of arising?
Yeah, I've been writing about this space for a really long time. And I would say, recently I've become really interested in the stablecoin kind of aspect of it. I have this thesis that stablecoins are kind of the final enemy of Bitcoin. Maybe not the final, an enemy. That's my opinion, of course. And so it's really interesting to see kind of all these different stablecoin issuers emerge in all kinds of different facets. That's been an interesting story. But within the Bitcoin community, I think, you're seeing a lot of different things. I was writing about a circular economy in Uganda and getting more and more sources about that kind of stuff. I've been writing a lot. I haven't actually been writing a ton this year, but have been writing about increasing institutional adoption of Bitcoin, of course, with pension funds. We had Sam Roberts from Cartwright and a couple of other people kind of comment on that. Um, and I've just been seeing, I mean, we're seeing right now like an incredible price demand and really stories driven by that price. And this is while there's a time period where I don't actually think retail is quite here. So it's a very interesting time to be in. So try to unpack kind of what's happening with the institutions, different companies, and who is buying Bitcoin and who is selling Bitcoin. I think those are kind of two interesting things to follow up on. And by and large, just trying to figure out all those different facets of the Bitcoin story. I was also fighting some FUD. I know we weren't supposed to talk about China, but someone like Indian media for whatever reason said that China had banned Bitcoin again, which was just totally false. So I had to go and correct the record there. But yeah, there's been a lot of richness of stories, and what I'm seeing and kind of where I'm most interested in, at least, is you're starting to see more and more people use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. And I think there's always been that relationship, it's always been a tense relationship maybe between store value and medium of exchange, right? But Robin, when I was talking to you, like one of the things that I've been really trying hard to do is I don't have any credit cards. And I'm trying really hard to live on, it's either cash or sats for me. It's the same thing whenever I've actually sold books as well. It was kind of like a vendor. And I am always at the point, and there's so many people have asked me, like, do you take card? And I'm like, I don't know, man. We're at a Bitcoin event, so probably not. So it's sats and cash in and sats and cash out, right? So yeah, I still do have I still do love cash as well, though. That is one thing. But, with sats, I'm starting to get a really good appreciation of the people who are really living their life out there and doing medium of exchange. So I live in Vancouver, and we've got a ton of merchants who are adopting. You saw Square has recently released that integration. I actually got to try it in Vegas. When we were selling books to the bookstore, that was actually through Square's terminal. I think it was like their like beta test or something with Bitcoin Vegas. So just seeing like this edge curve and sort of what it takes to get there. And you caught me fresh out of BitDevs. So we were just talking about like, what does that look like for like the average person who isn't on Bitcoin right now? And I think that for people like us, like we're willing to accept a lot of different, UI, UX, like user interface difficulties, just because we're so committed to like, for example, I'm just like so against credit cards, so against, being banked in many ways, right? But what is it going to look like when you have the average person start thinking about spending money and earning money in sats? And I'm doing both now. So that's kind of been something I've been really interested in, just getting people's stories, whether that's merchants, trying to understand like what will drive massive merchant adoption. And then also just understanding kind of like these stories of the Bitcoin economy as it's emerging. And really for me, I think you're seeing a lot of narrative around store value, and that's got, the price is pumping. We're in a good summer of sorts. It seems like a little bit of a bull cycle right now. But the stories that I'm kind of gravitating to right now are really about people spending sats, people accepting sats, and that just becoming like a more normalized thing.
I'm thinking a lot about the media exchange side of things. What do you think is what do you think would be a big catalyst for Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, as a currency?
Yeah, I was actually spending some time thinking about this. So having Square and Block on Bitcoin's side is incredible. It's actually really amazing. And of course, like, don't always kill your heroes, and like if they do something wrong and whatever, I don't, you know what I'm saying? But the reason why I bring that up is because we've had a lot of merchant adoption in Vancouver. I think Vancouver's been a pretty good case study. But what I would say about that is that a player like Square will bring the knowledge of how to scale to like thousands and thousands and thousands of merchants. I think pound for pound, they are the most impressive merchant adoption app, possibly of all time. Because I was thinking about this, and like, you have WeChat and you have Alipay. And those kind of grew because WeChat was, for those that don't know, that's kind of like the two Chinese payment solutions. But WeChat kind of like had a cheat code, which was that people were using WeChat anyways because it's also a social app. So they were using it as a social app and to receive money. And then Alipay had the advantage because they had small business loans and financing and stuff like that. But Square really built itself outside of this infrastructure by creating, I don't know if you remember like those little nodules that, you stuck in your phone. So it was completely like user experience oriented. Like it just offered a much better user experience for merchants. And since then, I think Square and Block have been really focused on continuing on that tradition, right? Just making it so easy for merchants. And, I've spoken to merchants and I know some people who have canvassed a lot of merchants. And what I think most people don't realize is the experience right now that they have of accepting Bitcoin is really not that smooth. And I think having a company that will bring in and kind of like give them everything they can expect in terms of support. And it's the little things that you don't expect. Like, for example, they don't really care about the transaction fees as much. What they do care about is that their staff are able to easily accept Bitcoin, right? That it's not just like an additional kind of service that they have to train for, that they spend hours training for. So Square and Block will actually bring that infrastructure that they've already developed to train everyone into using their new POS system. And they're just going to flip a switch and incentivize people. And I think there's going to be some pretty strong incentives for it. I think given, how Jack is running the company and everything, that there will be a lot of experimentation with merchants accepting Bitcoin. And I think you're going to see a huge surge, I anticipate, of businesses accepting Bitcoin, and some of them that we won't even expect or know about. So that's definitely something that I think is going to be an accelerator. And then, of course, people are going to get more and more, like as you get more and more people interested in Bitcoin, and typically, Bitcoin demand, I'm sure people in the show, I'm sure you are, Robin, getting calls and texts, and people just love to get interested and move when the price is moving. And so I think that's going to be a big factor for, I think people start with store value, and then some people start getting into the community, and then some people start getting into the medium exchange. I also have noticed that there's a lot of local events and meetups now. And pretty much every major city in the world now has like some kind of community hub or some kind of meetup group, or at least a Telegram group, right? And so I think there's going to be these like larger pockets. Not only is there going to be just all of a sudden a bunch of businesses that are accepting Bitcoin, there's going to be strong and building communities and circular economies that are building up. And just speaking of, like, I'm just thinking even like this summer, right? Like there's like a block party, a Bitcoin block party that's happening on Vancouver Island, which is like super remote. And then, Portland has like an event. And so like there's all these events that are happening right now. And there's all these opportunities for people to spend sats. But even more beyond the short term, even long term, there are people that are, switching their entire kind of business model, some of them, in order to sell in sats, right? Those are rare examples, but I'm seeing more and more. At the beginning, it used to be more like, okay, well, there's a Bitcoin conference. We'll have a couple of like food trucks, and then some of them might accept Bitcoin, right? But you're seeing more and more businesses that are like in it for the long haul. And I think that's really exciting as well.
You mentioned a lot of interesting things. The local meetup groups, they are really driving grassroots adoption because they want to go to the restaurants where there's Bitcoin accepted. They don't want to go to a restaurant where it's a Bitcoin meetup and then they don't even accept Bitcoin at the restaurant. So in Vienna, we have a meetup and the owner is a Bitcoiner. He accepts Bitcoin. He even makes Bitcoin content online now. So it's like, this is where Bitcoiners want to go, and they're no longer tolerant. And there's this, I think with Jeff Boover talked about that if there is enough people intolerant about using Bitcoin. They really want to use Bitcoin. I think the number is about 4%. If 4% of the population is kind of like, I have to use Bitcoin, this kind of forces merchant adoption. This kind of forces all the infrastructure to build out for those 4%. And then everyone has the option to. It doesn't need like 50% of the population, because some people say like, oh, we need so many people wanting to pay in Bitcoin. No, actually we don't. Like if enough purchasing power is intolerant and says like, if someone walks into a car dealership and says like, oh, do you accept Bitcoin? No? Okay, I'll go to the next one. At some point, people are like, oh shit, we lost this week 5 customers because we did not accept Bitcoin. Let's see if we can accept Bitcoin. Oh, that's easy. You just need that like one thing, and it costs like $50 a month. Yeah, and then we make like $20,000 more revenue. Yeah, it makes sense to do that. So I think that's a really interesting part where we have to be intolerant. And I love those people, and I know they're out there and they're doing that. That's go out there and go to the supermarket like, oh, do you accept Bitcoin? Or go to the restaurant, oh, do you accept Bitcoin? And you don't even have to be an ass. You don't even have to walk out. Just a question is like, if there's a waitress and she hears in 1 week 5 times, do you accept Bitcoin? At some point, she will go to the boss and say like, hey, this week 5 people ask me if we accept Bitcoin. Do we accept that? Or like, what is up with that? We just need enough people to like be a little bit annoying about that and little bit pushing it as a grassroots adoption. And so this is probably the biggest accelerator we can do. And also what you said, I liked it a lot with we have to get like the players that are already in the game accepting Bitcoin. So of course we could also develop a new app, a new hardware thing, and then try to get it across to as many people as possible for them to accept Bitcoin. But a restaurant is more likely, if they already have Square and if they already have some device where they accept payments, they're like, hey, there's this Bitcoin option also. I can just put that checkbox on and now accept Bitcoin also. And it's super easy. That's a way easier sell than going from restaurant to restaurant saying like, hey, I have a new device. It costs 100 euros. Want to buy it? Then you can accept Bitcoin. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need another thing. I have to train my staff on that. Like, it's a headache. Like, why would you do that? So that's probably the biggest thing where we can go to. Let's have the established players like see the value of Bitcoin, and there will be new players. And also the game theory is interesting, because if the established players are not accepting Bitcoin and they are pushing it out, then they're making space in the market for actually new players to come in and say like, hey, that's how you accept Bitcoin. So game theory again works in favor of us, but it's a really interesting topic of how we push Bitcoin as a medium exchange, because most people just look at, hey, like, when are we at 1 million? But we also need the medium exchange side of things. We need Bitcoin as a currency also. I hope so, at least.
Yeah, that's definitely my strong conviction, is that like Bitcoin will succeed through all facets, right? And there's people who the store of value, medium exchange, unit of account. I think the more people who get paid in Bitcoin, and I'm actually working with this Canadian company, Block Rewards. We just launched a product that basically allows people to get their salaries in Bitcoin. So the more people get paid in Bitcoin, the more people spend sats. I think that becomes kind of like a virtuous cycle. And I know a lot of, because I don't know if you're familiar with like George Selgin. I get it's like really random Twitter debates with like really random people. George Selgin is kind of the eminence of free banking. He's really big on the whole idea that private banks, given the way they can be set up, a little bit like Chaumian mints, or you might think about like e-cash mints in terms of reserve-backed private banks. In any case, he and I got into like this argument at one point. And he was just like, I just don't see Bitcoin as like a currency. I don't see Bitcoin as money. No one can convince me otherwise, because, medium of exchange implies that there's a place where someone, like there's a country or a place or sovereignty where like everybody is using that as like their day-to-day currency, right? And he's not entirely wrong. that isn't happening in like a physical place. But if you think about like the density, like Noster, for example, or if you think about these meetup groups that we're talking about, or if you're thinking about the fact that El Salvador has about like, 8 or I think like 18 or whatever percentage they have of like merchant adoption in El Salvador, you can start to really piece together and live your life on that standard. And so I think Bitcoin is money for few of us, but I think that Bitcoin is, that's what really excites me is I think Bitcoin is going to become money for a lot of people. And it might come much quicker than any of us are thinking.
I love that. I did not know that you were working for Block Rewards. The CEO is Scott Teddles, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm working with them. So I used to actually like back in the day. I mean, we're all yeah. You can ask me about how to get a Bitcoin job, but but like I used to work in digital marketing. I mean, I still do work in digital marketing, and so I was helping like more ad tech companies and things like that. So I was kind of doing that while I was writing. And yeah, just found I think like a great opportunity with like a great Bitcoin company, and I get paid in Sats, so it's all good, all part of the deal.
It's really cool. I just mentioned it because he has been also 2 times already in the show, and it was great. I think I met him also in El Salvador about a year ago in November. Great dude. So I like him. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, we got a pretty solid team. Like I think I'm biased because I'm part of it, but there's Seb who wrote The Hidden Cost of Money, and there's a couple of other people that are like less public facing. But no, it's a really cool
Oh,
squad.
Seb Bunny. Oh, I
Yeah,
love him
Seb is
so
also on the
much.
team.
Like he's really great. Like I had him on the podcast, I think also 2 times. So
Yeah,
three people of your team already have been 2 times on, and Seb is. It's always so interesting to talk with him. He has so many interesting things to say, and always at the end of the conversation, I'm like, "Oh shit, I want to go deeper."
yeah. No, we got a great squad. We got great fireside chats and stuff like that. Okay, we got some good shower thoughts, observations. I don't know what you talk about with like both Scott and Seth, but they're both very different lines of thinking. But yeah, very very cool people for sure, and it's a really cool team. And there's actually like some really, really cool Bitcoiners that are like more behind the scenes that actually also work with the team. So not to pump too much. I am wearing the hat, but not to pump it too much. But like, I do think we have a pretty good squad and a pretty good product.
Really, really cool. I'm interested in because you said stable coins, and I noted it down as you said it's the last enemy, and it's a really interesting one because I cannot really decide if it's kind of an enemy or threat to Bitcoin, or if it might just be a Trojan horse that accelerates actually Bitcoin adoption as it warms people up to digital money, and Bitcoin is digital money. And stable coins, for me, just for the record, it's not money, but people will see it as money. So it kind of like, if central banks and if the governments are doing educational work that there is this digital thing and it's the same as cash, it could actually be kind of a good thing for Bitcoin, because if they have a wallet and the wallet is allowing for Bitcoin, for stable coins, and for normal fiat or like the CBCs or like whatever there's in this wallet coming, they at least come over the hurdle that something digital has also value. Stable coins for me have no just throw that out there, but it might be a warm up for those people who are really against digital completely. They are like, it's only cash, and if I cannot touch it, it is nothing. Because there are a lot of people out there, especially older people. So this could actually be a good thing. So I want to just touch on that. What your thoughts are on like stable coins being the enemy, being a threat to Bitcoin, versus actually might being a Trojan horse that might in a weird way accelerate Bitcoin adoption?
Yeah, I understand the Trojan horse angle. I'm going to violate the rule again and talk about China. No, I'm kidding, but kind of not. No, so listen, like where my perspective comes from is most of the stablecoin users that I see, and it's not just China, by the way, but it's also like Argentina, Turkey, Iran, all these different places. It's not that they're unused to digital money. In fact, so first thing to start with is that like, who uses stablecoins? right? And it's typically people who want to have access to a currency, but also don't have access to the banking service underlying that. That's at least the vast majority of people with stablecoins. Having said that, I was just at BitDevs with someone who's like so against the banks that they're using like USDC or something, but I'm a little bit like, I don't know, that sounds a little pointless to me, but that's fine. Because if you're going to go to all that effort, why don't you just store all your value in Bitcoin, right? But in any case, but the reason why I see it as more of a rival is that the people it's onboarding are not necessarily unused to digital. So using the China example, because that's just the example I'm most familiar with, but also, let's say Iran as well. The people there are, especially Chinese people, are super used to digital payments. But what they use stablecoins for is to get access to the US dollar, right? Without having US banking accounts. That's literally, I think, 95, whatever percent plus of like stablecoin usage. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who use it for loans or like whatever, all kinds of these products and stuff like that. But that's like the vast majority of that usage seems to be that kind of segment, whether it's companies or people. And you have countries with certain capital restrictions. So they don't let you bring money in or out of the system, right? So really, and I've talked to some of these like exchanges and counters, and they'll be like, well, we don't really deal in Bitcoin because our customers don't want Bitcoin. What they want is they want stable coins because to them, stable coins and the US dollar are what matter, right? So it's not that it's onboarding people to a new digital form of payment. It's actually embedding them into the traditional architecture, but giving them access they didn't have before. So my sense of that is that stable coins are more of a rival. They're more of a trade-off, I would say. But ultimately a rival. And ultimately what you're really fighting is for those people who could have been the next, or who could still be the next billion for Bitcoin, or, who could have been, those builders on there. Instead, they're just stuck on the US dollar being such a dominant hedge and like such a dominant safe haven for them, right? And so I think that is one of maybe the last frontier. I mean, maybe a little dramatic about that, but I've been in a few panels and we've talked a little bit about like the currency order. And what you do see is you saw that with the British pound, sterling, and when the US dollar, maybe you'll see something similar. But when a world currency stops being like the world reserve currency, like many interesting things happen, right? And in the case of the United States, the fall of the pound sterling is really what enabled countries around the world to kind of launch their own independence movements. It was the end of the British Empire, and it was the beginning of the United States, like unquestioned rules of hyperpower. I don't know what it will look like. I believe that Bitcoin will replace the US dollar. I don't quite know. Actually, even in my small human mind, my monkey mind, I can't quite comprehend all the consequences of that. I just feel like that there will be a lot. And the one big obstacle that's stopping us from getting there is you have all this demand. And that's what's so frustrating. It's people who are working outside of their systems, right? But instead of working outside their systems and going towards this new system of Bitcoin, they're kind of like staying with the devil that's more familiar, like the US dollar, right? So ultimately, I do think that stablecoins are propping up the fiat system. I mean, of course, they're buying treasury, they're buying US debt, for example. They're going to be more and more regulated. And this includes both Hong Kong, the United States. Any kind of issuing country is going to want to have their hands on the stable coins. And, effectively, the major stable coins already cooperate with the, FBI or investigative services or anything like that. Otherwise, they probably would not be allowed to operate even the way that they are. But I ultimately think that they will, that's just going to be the last stumbling block. Like people, I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't know if, it might actually be younger people that like get rid of this block. But to give you an example and not to violate the rule about China, like there are like 100x more sellers of Tether than there are Bitcoin, unfortunately. And, it's because Tether, first of all, people use that to go and shitcoin. I mean, that's a known thing. Second, the spread is lower. And the third is it just, even though the US dollar moves a lot, if you look at the dollar index, I mean, it obviously doesn't move as much as Bitcoin does in the short term. And people just can't get over that psychological barrier, I think, as of yet. So I think that's the thing that Bitcoiners, I mean, stablecoins are just kind of like a front for this. Really what it is that for Bitcoin to become the world reserve currency, you have to get rid of this psychological kind of, there's been 40 or 50 years of training that treasuries and US dollars are undefeatable. Like they're like perfect hedges and etc. It's beaten into you and even in training. Like when you learn finance, the risk-free rate is the treasury rate, right? So it's like baked into the global financial assumption.
Just to throw that out there, I didn't give you any rule to not talk about China. people will be mad at me in the comments. Why don't you allow him to talk about China?
No, Robin is holding me hostage, you guys. Like actually though, like yeah. He's playing nice now, but no. That's a self-imposed thing. I just kind of want to try to diversify, but of course, we'll use like so much of my research. I think like I spent 2 years researching on it, so of course I'll bring some examples from it.
Yeah, it's super, and it's also good that you can build on that. Yeah, it's like not a complete thing. But I wanted to make an interesting comparison, and I really want to know what you think about that comparison. I compare stable coins to Blu-ray, and I'll show you why. While you were talking, I just made ChatGPT through a small chart for that. And I kind of asked like, what is the kind of the milestones for Blu-ray? And it kind of like appeared in the early 2000s, got the first commercial thing. So it needed some time to actually get going and to actually make headways. And like the peak Blu-ray popularity was around like 2010, apparently 2015. I was pretty young there, so I don't even really know. But I know we had Blu-rays at home. And when we watched the movie, I know we watched it on Blu-ray. And then around 2016, 2020, this was the really the decline of Blu-ray. So they had maybe the peak of it 2014, and then it could decline again. And in a similar way, I feel like, and all this time, the internet was already there. Like Google is 2002, Google was already there for 4 years. And then it's like, okay, why was streaming not a thing? Because the infrastructure and the internet was just not good enough for that to happen. Did I close it again?
Your figure closed on me. Like it's a very beautiful story, but I have no idea what you're talking about. No, I'm kidding.
Yes. So this kind of shows of you have that an upward trend of Blu-ray because digital was not ready yet, and Blu-ray was better than the normal discs that you had before because it just had so much more storage and all those things. In the same way as if you have a normal fiat bank account, stable coins is a lot better. Like you can transact on 24/7. You can do a lot more things. It's cheaper to transact like globally. All those things that we also sometimes praise with Bitcoin. Stablecoins also have that in the same way as Blu-ray kind of got over from disc. So we had digital always here, and we had the internet always here, but the internet needed time to build out the infrastructure to actually get going. And it was then that point. And if we threw now like a streaming content in there, this probably like goes here and then goes up here somehow, and then like completely erases Blu-ray. And I see stablecoins kind of a similar thing where people are excited about it now, and like it brings a lot of like real world use case, the same way as Blu-ray brought real world use cases in there. But that will change once Bitcoin is actually getting going and the infrastructure is built out, the layer 2, layer 3 things are built out, and the Fediments and the Lightnings and whatever comes with that is built out. And the merchant adoption, the infrastructure around the ecosystem of Bitcoin is built out. This just needs time. Like it's not like, oh yeah, let's make some things happen. Like the infrastructure needs to build out in a small way. So that's how I personally see stable coins. It's kind of a blip in the history, the same way as Blu-ray was very hyped and people, oh, Blu-ray, and then nobody gives a shit now about Blu-ray. It's just like 2014 was the peak. Now we're 10 years later. 10 years ago, everyone talked about Blu-ray. Now nobody really cares. Like nobody talks about it except me with weird stablecoins comparisons.
I see where you're going with that. I believe like the direction of where you're going in. Like, I definitely believe that. Like, I think like stable coins are kind of a flash in the pan, super hot. But after a while, people are going to realize like, oh wait, this is just tied to like a fiat currency, but it's the better fiat currency than my fiat currency. But it's descending downwards. I did think what you said is kind of interesting because I haven't. So I think like I see the world through like kind of we all see the world in our different lenses. And so from where I sit, so I live in Canada, hopefully not for much longer, but anyways, but I live in Canada, and what I think is really interesting with that is I don't see a ton of stablecoin demand, even though the Canadian banking system, I mean, there is a tool called e-transfer, which makes decently chunked, like I think it takes like 30 minutes to clear sometimes like payments, like they're kind of like interbank payments. But what I've also noticed is that since most Canadians have access to US banking, or the banks in Canada can also give US dollars. So, especially in the major cities that are really close. By the way, fun fact, I think like I forget the exact number. Don't fact check me on this. Just accept it blindly. But like 80 or 85% of Canadians live within like 150 miles of the United States. So we would definitely be like the easiest country like to conquer, if the United States wanted to.
Don't give them ideas.
They already have the idea. Like, I'm not saying anything that no one already knows. But anyways, you're making it sound like I'm like spilling out this like top secret James Bond material. But so the thing with that is like the stablecoin demand that I've seen like in Canada has been really, really weak. Like, I've seen like Coinbase try to like bring base around, and like there's a couple of cafes that like accept it, but like Coinbase subsidizes that. Like, I've heard of like one or two cases, like I mentioned to you, like someone I know who uses USDC, they borrow against their Bitcoin and they use USDC. But I've literally never heard of like anyone using stable coins other than that, like in Canada. And to me, I think when I hear about stable coins, there's actually this like Chinese entrepreneur I was talking to, and he was like, you know what, I'm going to try to get people who have Tether access to US banking. Because really the disconnect is that they want US dollars, but they don't have access to US banking. I don't really see it the other way around. Like, if you have banking, yeah, like in theory, like everybody complains about it, right? Like, oh, wire transfers suck and all this other stuff. But I don't actually see a lot of people like move in that way, or at least like anecdotally, of course, right? Like, it doesn't seem like that's where all the motion is. And from everything I've seen from like the quantitative even, and like just who is trading over the counter with Tether, by the way, like it's Chinese people, at least in Vancouver. Like, there's like huge volumes being traded, I think. But regardless, like I just don't see there being like that domestic demand. So that's where I'm like, the Blu-ray thing is like, doesn't make like, it makes sense to me in terms of like, it's a flash in the pan, but it's almost like, I don't know, like two separate products a little bit, because it's not the same, like we're not using the same like DVD players almost. It's like a different, it's like a product that, I can't think of this metaphor right on the top of my head, but that's where I think it's like a little bit different, is like the demand for both is a little bit different, at least in my opinion.
It's a good point, because I don't think like Blu-ray at some point really took over. We're like, this is the shit, and like we want movies to only be on that thing. And I don't think stablecoins will ever be at that point of adoption where people will only have stable coins. So I hope that we kind of cut the stablecoin adoption because of Bitcoin being more and more dominant, and people don't want this fiat thing anymore. I've transacted actually 3 years ago once with stable coins because I was forced to, by some exchange.
Like a gut point or something, or like
no James Bond story again. But yeah, by exchange. But anyways, this is I also don't know any reason why I should use stable coins, because I don't know how the law is in Canada and in other parts of the world, but in Austria they see stable coins the same way as they see any other cryptocurrencies. So you actually have to pay capital gains tax on that and stuff like that. And you have to kind of report all of that. So if you transact in stable coins, it's a headache in Austria. And you actually have to report it the same way as you would do it with Bitcoin or with stocks or with anything else. So yeah, I personally also don't see it, but I see stablecoin adoption happening a lot in not as developed countries, where they don't have access to, as you said, like, yes, if you don't have access to it. And yeah, Blu-ray is more of an upgrade. So the comparison hints on like a lot of different things where, the Blu-ray is more of an update, an upgrade to it. And it's an easier sell. Like, like you just like get more and you don't really have to opt in on a new system. But yeah, that's kind of I just used that to show people this will be only a short-term thing. And even though you are now really excited about, in 10 years, nobody will care about your stable coin. I think that's the main message I want to get across. It's like, yeah, that's really cool. And in some sense, you could even make the argument that fiat currencies and in general, as we have it now since 1971, I know we had fiat currencies in some form forever, but like the form that we have it now since 1971 will be only a blip in the history. And you're like, oh, like, okay, was this weird thing where people just printed money recklessly out of thin air and paid for everything. And yeah, that era is kind of gone now, and it's good that it's gone now.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this is where so I remember like when we saw each other in Vegas, they had me and Efrat and Cedric from the Bitcoin Matrix podcast, and then Ben, I think, was Efrat's friend, and and I always get put on panels like this. It's like, how do you reimagine the world's like financial economic architecture in like an hour? So it was basically like Bretton Woods 2.0. So we were talking a lot about the IMF and the World Bank, and anyways, the reason why I bring this up is because I actually think a lot of the steps it would take for Bitcoin to be a reserve world currency are very underexplored. And I know that we all oftentimes have this idea that it's inevitable, and I actually do believe that as well. But sometimes the how is as important as the why. And if you look at like the mechanics of, you were just mentioning like 1971 being a blip. And I think over a long enough history, my whole thesis has been that, the United States has kind of been a teenager. And in fact, you can argue the United States, this is like a very long form argument, but the United States is kind of a blip in history as well. But humanity is a blip in history if you consider it the universe. But to bring that a little bit back in, what I'm really trying to say is that the currency that we see now, as you've correctly identified, is part of a cycle, and these cycles come in and out. And there have been instances where there have been paper money that is not backed. There have been instances of commodity backed money that becomes paper money. The government inflates too much. The money supply goes too high. The money is not worth anything. Prices go up, and then political instability. So there's a very, again, obviously this happened in China. This is why several dynasties fell. It was the reason why Rome also suffered towards the end as well. They had a lot of different currency fluctuations with the denarius and all these different things. I'm not like a Roman history expert, so I'm not going to pretend to get that deep into it. But you can see like the greatest empires and dynasties of the past were kind of roiled by this. And even we were just talking about like the pound sterling, that was the world reserve currency. It was the British Empire and the pound sterling, and that fell apart basically almost immediately after World War II. And it's kind of really interesting to think about like what were the mechanics of that? Like why did the gold standard ultimately, what happened with it? Like, why were there certain imbalances? And when you're thinking about like where we are now and where we will be in the future, it's like, how does, because we sound like crazy people right now, Robin, I think, but there is a path to this. And I actually see this as being just mechanistic. Obviously, Lynn always says, like, nothing stops this train. There's a lot of fiscal spending that's just mandatorily baked into different programs and things like that. But it's really asking yourself, like, what are the trading blocks that need to exist, right? Like, in order for Bitcoin to be a world reserve currency, several countries are probably going to have to hold it. And several countries are not going to have to only hold it, they are probably going to have to trade with each other across strategic reserves. What does, you know, a multilateral financial organization like the IMF, which organizes loans, or the World Bank, which is development loans, what does that look like in that world? Do we have a world where, you know, everything is a nation state the way it's organized? I've been reading a lot about, and I mean, I'm just going to assume because you're European that you know some of this, but, but like Germany and Italy went through this whole process, of course, of like going from being different city states and principalities into these like unified countries, right? Germany with Prussia, and then Italy with all the city states kind of coming together. Um, and I almost think that there's an opportunity. What you see with reserve currencies changing is that not only does financial power change, but political power changes and the balance shifts. And I think in combination with there being maybe new territories, you might see more models. And not to be abstract about this, because I think I mentioned to you, I'm writing a second book. So I've been spending some time thinking about this. Not only have I spent a lot of time thinking about like, how do I as an individual be more sovereign in this world? How can I be more free using tools like Bitcoin and Nostr to express myself and to spend money and create value where I see fit? But also, what are the kind of structural frameworks that we would need for people to be able to thrive? Because right now, your options are really, it's flag theory. You can choose one country or another country, and maybe a country is better than another country, but you can only really choose between countries. Like maybe there's one or two free cities or city states that we're talking about. And I think eventually that with all these changes we're talking about, the world reserve currency being Bitcoin, people working remote, people having more agency and the ability to determine, their economic agency and livelihood, we're going to see some really interesting results. And I'm hopeful that will mean that it will be much easier for individuals to be more sovereign, but that also there are new societies and organizations that are not quite the nation state. For example, you can choose maybe certain parts of it, or you can choose other parts. And what I mean by that is, for example, think about like education, right? For example, now obviously there's been like a movement towards like online schooling and all these different other things. And so it's never been easier to actually teach people things online. Now, of course, like in-person engagement and things like that, those things matter. But my point being that the functions of the state, you can kind of attack it like a concentric circle, and parts of it you can kind of borrow away from. Right now, currently, the way to do that is by living in a country and kind of borrowing their infrastructure. There's not really any way around that. But I think that there's going to be like organizations, there's going to be city states, maybe they're in space, maybe they're in the ocean with seasteading, maybe they're kind of like emerging out of these federal principalities. But I sense like a changing moment, that kind of like fourth turning kind of event. And the idea being that as the money changes, the politics do too. And you're seeing some of this with, I think the one thing that the world is kind of moving towards, whether or not we agree with it or not, is that borders matter less and less. There used to be a pretty strict, consensus on like, we had these borders settled since, 1949 or since 19 whatever. And we've kept it kind of the same way. The United States has been sort of an enforcer of sorts on that, right? But now you're seeing, countries are changing their borders, not just Russia, Ukraine, that's the famous example, but Rwanda has invaded the Congo, for example, right? And that's been something that's been, kind of unquestioned. Western Sahara has split, South Sudan split from Sudan, right? Like new countries are being built. Some of them are bloody, really bloody events. I'm not saying these are like good things per se, but what I am pointing out is that there is more space for more organizations to emerge, different things in the state, and more opportunities for people to be sovereign and to see more sovereign organizations and countries or country-like organizations kind of organize around them. It's like, to me, I think this is my opinion, of course, and like my vision of it, but like, I would love to see a world where you could decide like, hey, like, I want to do it like a la carte, and countries or organizations are kind of catering to you. And then everybody's using Bitcoin, and that's kind of like a way that you can store your value, exchange value, and kind of go through this different system. And it's not this crazy system right now that we have where you have to like trade between these different paper currencies. Each one might be worse than the other in order to be able to survive. So that's just my thinking about that. Like, as we see these like big abstract themes, I think like thinking about it as an individual is really interesting, but then also thinking about what that means for society as a whole.
The first time I ever made any money, I got myself from that money a watch. And ever since then, I collect timepieces to remember times where I achieved some milestone. That's why I got the Bitcoin 2025 edition when I went to my first ever American Bitcoin conference. So for me, the Bitcoin watches from Coin Vigilante represents the time that we are living in. For every person that wears a Bitcoin watch, I know they are representing sound money to the outside world. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. I know how big of a hurdle it can be to have self-custody, but it's so freaking important to make that first step. We have to make sure it's as easy and simple as possible. And that's exactly what Bitbox did. Bitbox created the simplest and the easiest hardware wallet to use to get into self-custody. So get yourself a Bitbox down from the link in the description. And when you use code Robin, you even get a 5% discount. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called micro-seed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With micro-seed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. And we have right now a summer sale going on for 15% off. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today for $186, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. It's super interesting. It's the concept of the sovereign individual. We kind of come to this world where you can choose where you are, and the borders kind of don't matter as much. And yeah, you're totally right. It's not there anymore. Like, of course, there are exit taxes. There is like, if you go out of that, like you have to deal with taxes and currencies and all that, but everything is digital. I I live in Austria. I don't have a single income source out of Austria. Like, there's no reason for me to actually be in Austria. I just be here because here's my family. I like the country, and I don't like the taxes, don't like the bureaucracy. But it's like, yeah, there's a price to that. So like, I want to live close to the family. I want to live in the country that I was born in. But it would be so super easy for me to just say goodbye. Like, everything is digital. I have 3 freelancers working for me. Only one of them is in Austria, and we don't have an office. Like, he could do the same thing no matter if I'm in Austria, in Vietnam, in El Salvador, in Vancouver, or like in Malta. I don't know. Like, you can be anywhere, and I can do the same thing that I'm doing now. I just need my equipment and the white wall behind me. Like, that's all I need, and that I can find everywhere. I mean, the one thing that I need is a good internet connection, and I really appreciate that about Vienna. They really have great internet connection, and this is the one thing that I'm probably most specific about. Is like, before I move somewhere, I need to be there and test the internet for like 2 weeks. It's like, is it really good? Like, I need really like strong internet for all those files up and downloading. But other than that, like, if I have good internet connection, like, I don't care. Like, I can be anywhere.
Yeah. And I mean, you're such high res, and if that's not possible, then like, we don't want it. No, but like, listen, like, I think for me, it's the optionality, right? Everybody has their own preferences. Like, I say, like, maybe I'm in Canada, maybe I'm not, but obviously I live in Canada, and that's, I grew up here, and there's also personal things and family things that are keeping me here as well. And as you mentioned, there's the exit tax as well, which is always a calculation. But I think just everybody having more optionality, and it's combining both, the untethering of our work life from country. Not only did Bitcoin separate money from state, but I think like remote work is also separating, your economic livelihood with, the country of your choosing, right? So you can really like kind of be fluid around. And I know, so actually the second book I'm working on is really just trying to make sense of like, people are freaking out about AI and all these other things. I'm just trying to get people to focus on like, yeah, there's some cool things happening there. Maybe they're going to create the Terminator. I don't know. But you got to have to remain grounded in some of these principles and make technology work for you and not get worked by technology. Right. And so what does that mean? And that means understanding why, backends matter. If there was like one simple message I'd have for like grandmas or grandpas or whatever, they're out there being like, why am I using, something to pay people with? I'm used to using banking. Let's just give you an example. Or why should I use Nostr? Like, because X is like this certain way, right? It's because people don't realize the backends, and what I mean by that is they don't realize the system's properties. And once they realize it, it's usually too late. That's when you've been banned, or that's when you've been censored, or that's when you've had your funds frozen, right? I think that more and more people are going to hopefully realize these tools, and I'm just writing to that. But to me, what's most important is that you maintain your economic agency, your ability to be able to choose and earn a livelihood. I think that's where freedom and autonomy stem from. And I know some people, I think the worst case scenario, and by the way, I do think like in Silicon Valley, there's like some planning for that. I used to work in Silicon Valley. And when you see something like Sam Altman creating, I've written about this before, Sam Altman creating OpenAI, right? And then he's also creating WorldCoin, which is scanning your eyeballs or like whatever, and trying to determine whether or not you're human or not. He's creating the problem, and then he's creating the solution. And I'm putting that in like big apostrophe points, right? Quotation marks. The the thing with that is that with open AI and all these different things, first of all, I think I I love ChatGPT. I'm not gonna like, it's very useful for its uses. But if you're only using ChatGPT, then you're not thinking, right? You got to be like using that technology to enhance what you're doing instead of just mindlessly kind of working on it. But the most important thing to take from that is that in the valley, I think there's this big drive towards like, oh, we're gonna build like AI stuff. We're gonna like get people to like, we're gonna take over all the workers. I mean, it's the flip side of like AI. It's like the idea is like we're gonna automate all the work, and then we're gonna let all the proceeds go to me, Sam Altman, or whatever. Um, the thing to really hold on to is to not let people trick you with like, oh yeah, there's gonna be a universal basic income or something like that. Like from who and for what? Well, from the government, right? And those should be the scariest words in the English language. Like the government is coming to help you, right? Um, I just think that with Bitcoin, with technologies like Nostr, with private key infrastructure, not only do you have like a basis for authenticity, like, hey, I'm a human. I think that's going to be really important. You have a way to interact with AI tools to make them more powerful, more enabled. I've been working on some, articles thinking through that. But most importantly, you have the opportunity to, in a world that's trying to centralize in many ways technology choices, right? Just like Google kind of centralized email protocols by using Gmail and putting Gmail as a front end in front of email. The world is trying, there are tech companies that are trying to move a smoother user experience, giving you all these incredible capabilities, but what's the trade-off? And the trade-off could just be your loss of autonomy and your loss of economic viability. But tools like Bitcoin will help you be able to still maintain that, be able to recognize value for value, transmit value for value. So we're talking about these circular economies. Not only do I think they're going to be the norm, I think they have to be the norm because if we otherwise are trapped in this world where these large behemoth companies and governments work together and they're automating people's work, controlling where they earn, and giving out these handouts, government's here for you. I think that rapidly gets into a dystopia. And there's so many instances of this, where you see dissidents who talk about how they would never be able to resist, if the government controlled where their food was coming from. And I think if we're not careful, that might be that world. But I'm very, very optimistic and hopeful that all this progress we're making in Bitcoin, all these things we're talking about, are coming together to fight against that.
I love this quote: "The scariest words in the world, the government will come and help you." That's. I love that one. We have to clip that and put it out on Twitter, I think.
I might have stolen that from someone though, so you might. I feel like I saw that on YouTube or something.
Everyone stole everything from everyone. Like I hate that concept of credit because like you cannot come up with shit. It only comes up in your mind because someone else put it in your mind somehow. So like it's a weird thing. Like it's like. I like the spirit of Satoshi. I mean, it's a whole different topic now. I like the spirit of Satoshi. You just create things and give it for humanity and don't say like, oh, you have to quote me. Like how weird would it be if Satoshi is around and says like, oh, wait, you talked about Bitcoin without talking about me? I don't know. It's a weird concept, this credit and things like ideas don't have owners, I feel like.
I'm with you on that now. Okay. You know what? Like, yeah, clip it. We're going live. We're going live. Like we're free individuals. Let's just do it, man. But yeah, no. So anyways, as I also spend a lot of time thinking about that, like just like the flag theory approach, like looking at like different residencies. I mean, there's been some really cool, just kind of weaving some of the themes we talked about. There's some really cool Bitcoin communities in some of these places. I don't know if you're actually, Robin, what's your travel schedule looking like if you don't mind doxing it? But Paraguay is having a conference, for example. So that's like a place I'm seeing where there's a lot of because it's pretty easy to get a residency there, for example. But
Yep. Yeah, Paraguay. I also heard Panama from some people in doing it. So there's a lot of like places that you might not like think of Bitcoin places, and then there's like, oh, there's a big community all of a sudden there. Yeah, I don't go to Paraguay, but yeah, it will be fun. I think I come to America 1 or 2 more times this year. Will be a fun experience. I have some interesting things going on there. It's like if you have an English speaking podcast, it's like all your things all of a sudden are in America, because 50% of your audience is in America, then the partners are in America, then the things that you're doing are in America, and it's like, oh shit, like I feel like I have to move to America, but I don't want to do that. But yeah, it's interesting with those flag theories. You also said you kind of hope that you move out of Canada soon. So I guess you are looking at like options where you can reside and get another flag, or like just move to another different jurisdiction.
Yeah. I mean, not to dox myself too much, but I mean, there's the obvious ones. Paraguay is one of them. There's a lot of Central America. I mean, the biggest issue I've found is that it's very hard with like, I mean, obviously with family and things like that. I think obviously the personal connections and things. I think it's also very hard for some people to understand. Because I know a lot of people who are like, oh, like we love to come to Canada, and I'm like, that's totally fine, but this is just, I have my own different thought of that. But no, I've spent some time thinking about it. I spent some time thinking about like all these little different aspects of that. For example, like how to set up a company, where to store certain things, and key management is actually like a fun thing to think about if you're geographically dispersed. Not to go too much into the details, but that's like, that also offers up some like pretty interesting avenues for you to have some hedges, and I think that having jurisdictional kind of arbitrage, or not even arbitrage, I think that word's overused. So let me just say, having the ability to flow through jurisdictions, I think is going to be really important, because I do feel like, unfortunately, for Bitcoin and for other things, like there are quite a few restrictions coming. So I can't speak to every country in the world, but let's just say Canada. They are passing a border security bill, which is trying to restrict cash. So they're trying to put a lifetime limit. I think it's $10,000 of like how much business you can do in cash with like a particular vendor. And I know in the EU, for example, there's some countries that have cash restrictions. I don't think Austria is one of them, but I know Greece is one. And I know
we have a restriction, but it's kind of high. It's 10,000 euros.
Yeah, 10,000 euros. But that's how they get you though, right? Because with inflation, after a while, they never change the limit, and then inflation kind of just changes the limit for you. But yeah, so there's definitely some things coming along the line. I think that my overall thesis is like with the debt, like you're just gonna see the value of a second citizenship or residency go up and up. And you've already started seeing this, by the way. Like there's some countries that used to offer programs at a certain rate. For example, Portugal, I think it used to be 250,000 euros, and then they had to up it to 500,000 euros, right? And that's kind of like the movement of it. There's some programs that have been discontinued and things like that. So there's this like increasing demand, I think, and meanwhile, like decreasing supply. And so obviously for that second residency, and I think part of the reason why there's going to be increasing demand is like I don't see a way around the fact that governments are overspending. Just kind of to your earlier point, this is what's going to cause a lot of the issues, and probably going to be the main reason why Bitcoin becomes so dominant. Hopefully in our lifetimes. I don't. I can never predict like timelines, right? I'm not like, I know some of your guests are like very good at like Bitcoin's going to be like $350,000 by like 2026 December 18th. Like as I'm like rolling out of my coffee shop, it's going to be exactly that. I'm not that person, but I definitely think from a directionality standpoint, it's going to be there, and that's going to be because governments are spending past their means. But that also means that governments are going to make it harder because they also realize this, right? They also realize that they are going to be in a bidding war. And I think for some of the more established nations, they're not used to being in that position. So I would put like European nations, like the G7 nations, they're not used to being, they're kind of used to being like, oh, we're like the net immigration sponges. Like we take young, talented people from across the world and then kind of take them in. That's kind of politically changing for other reasons too. But I would say that um, even within that, like those countries are going to have to start getting used to like the reverse, like kind of a brain drain, the other way around, where it makes a lot more sense for people who, like we all have our personal circumstances, like you mentioned, family. I have family too, but there's just going to be much stronger incentives, whether it's 0% tax, whether it's just like a better entrepreneurial community, whether it's just like you just have more people working remote where it is, or the weather sucks. I mean, that's a huge one for Canada, by the way. The weather sucks in Canada everywhere. So to go to anywhere that's pretty warm is great for any Canadian. And I think like these countries are going to start to have to get used to competing in that dimension, but there's going to be like a lagging period as like kind of like a zombie period, I think, where it's like 20, 30 years, maybe even longer, where these countries just simply do not acknowledge that reality. And instead, what they're going to try to do is they're spending all this money. So now you have the welfare state, which is kind of continually, going to be the way it is. And that's kind of fixed, at least in the Canadian or the American context, and certainly in the European context. But now, in addition to that, you see this drive towards increased military spending. The idea that every NATO member should spend 5% of GDP. Whether or not you agree with that or not, like politically, sure. But what I'm just pointing out is just from an economic standpoint, like something has to give, right? You're spending more and more money. Your population is getting older. So you're going to spend more on healthcare and all these mandatory drivers. And you're also going to try to spend more on military defense. And you're also going to try to spend more on, all these other different things. And it's incredibly unpopular to raise taxes. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to go after the wealthiest or whatever. But what that really means is they're going to go after like the people that are the most politically vulnerable. And among that constituency are people who are trying to exit the country, right? So of course, increasing the exit tax is going to be very popular with people who vote in that country. I think that's, in Canada, that's like one thing they're already evaluating, right? So they're going to make it harder to exit.
If you look at the history of taxation, they always want to tax the rich, and they always do tax the poor middle class. Like income tax is a famous example where they wanted to tax the wealthy and the income wealthy. But guess what? It now is completely on them. It really catches most of the middle range of income and middle range of wealth in each country, because like the very poor income people, they don't have a lot of income to spare, so they don't really drive a lot of income. And then the really rich, they don't have income. Like Elon Musk earns like $1 a year on Tesla's salary. They're like, we don't want income, we want equity. So it's always, I personally think you will never be able, and you should also not be able to tax those people who make jobs and provide for the society in that sense, and build companies and build products and services, because they are the ones that really pay the most of the taxes with their companies and with their presence, and those bring a lot of financial energy into a country. And especially in this world where you can just spin up companies everywhere, where if you have a really interesting idea and you want to spin something up, for example, there's N26. It's an Austrian-Germany example. And N26 was an interesting banking idea. And it's a complete fiat thing. And like, it's just like the bank that I use usually. And those were two Austrians wanted to starting it in Vienna. But it was so complicated to get the banking license and all those things. And then they were like, hey, let's see if it's in other countries faster. They started in Berlin. I mean, Germany is not good at all, but like in Berlin, for some reason, they got it really faster. And then they started the whole thing in Berlin. and now it's a German company, and it's a huge banking institution now, and it's global. They even have like banking in America now. They're a really huge banking institution now. They were not there at all like 8 years ago. And
Yeah.
two Austrians kind of started that. That's just like a very small example that it does matter
Mhm.
what a country is doing, especially in a digital world, especially in a remote world. And then also money all of a sudden is everywhere accepted. You can live on Bitcoin everywhere. There's so many things where you can just pay in Bitcoin and get cash. You don't need a bank account anymore. I could live without bank account if I really wanted to. It's too much of a hurdle, so I don't do it. But my bank account is always empty. But that's why I'm always saying like, yeah, like I'm at N26, steal my money. There's nothing on there. Hack into my bank account. It's like there's literally you cannot get anything with that. Like there's no limits to it. Like the maximum is like maybe 2,000 euros. Like go ahead to do it. So it's like if you're in this world where money is everywhere available and you don't need KYC also for that, like you have the possibility to do that, and then also you can work with a website. You can launch literally a website and sell stuff there, and you don't need anything. Then you're just like free citizen of the world, and you don't care about anything. So those restrictions with like exit tax and all those things, like people are not stupid. People will not move to a country that has like a huge exit tax. So the incentive is to tax like real estate because that cannot move out of the country, and tax things that are kind of solid. And it's hard to. Sailor always gives this famous example of, I think it's an Italian port. I might be wrong about that, but it's a port that a lot of rich people really like to be there. And then the locals said like, oh shit, like they're not paying any taxes here, and they're using all our infrastructure. And then the political shift actually came to be, and they kind of made a tax for the rich people. Mm-hmm. And what happened is all the rich people before the tax came took their boats and ran to the next port. And then in the next years, this port was kind of degrading really fast. And all the restaurants had to close, all the coffees had to close because they didn't pay taxes in like income tax, but they paid the tax in the restaurants and the hotels and all the things that they used there, and brought a lot of purchasing power there. Long story short, I think taxes will always benefit the capital that can flee in the quickest way. So Bitcoiners will benefit from that a lot.
Yeah, and no, Robin, I think that's well put. And I just add to like two dimensions to what you were saying. Like the first is it's kind of a there's two parts. There's one part is there's like Cantillon effect still, even with taxation. Like people who are closer to the political power, they tend to be the wealthiest as well, and they are able to dictate kind of like these credits or things like that. That the middle class doesn't have any access to. So that's like one example. But I also think that there's so many perverse incentives. And in government, this tends to happen where there's an intentionality, but the highway to hell is paved with good intentions. And it's exactly the mechanism you described, because what happens is the people who, if you design a system where there is a lot of incentive to leave, then the people who are wealthy enough will leave or find a way to get around the system. And not in a like illegal way, but just in a way where they comply, but also like in a way that they have a lot of skin in the game in order to figure that out, right? But it's the middle class that doesn't have access to these like privileges, or, the working class. The doctor that's making like 400K a year kind of as a prototypical example, right? Because they're making just pure salary. And even I think what will happen, because I know the way Europe and I think other countries are trying to solve that, is they're trying to impose like a wealth tax. And which I think would be flagrantly like just from a principle standpoint, just terrible for people's privacy, people's autonomy, and everything like that. But let's consider what they're thinking, and like basically they want to tax through wealth tax, and then they want to close the loophole with corporates. So the whole idea was with the Biden administration back in the day, they were trying to get a global minimum corporate tax, right? So they're trying to close these loops as they're realizing them. But the problem is that you're creating these really strong incentives for people to, so that the people that you end up really hurting are the people who can't really avoid this, right? So it's kind of like the Cantillon effect in the sense that you really are penalizing the people who that uh, earn just enough and earn that money because they are entrepreneurs or because they are building in, the country. I don't think anybody really questions, like, for example, like, is a doctor worth that much money or whatever? And is an entrepreneur worth that much money? Um, and I think that, when you have that amount of money, but it's being earned entirely in salary, and that's because like you're creating your value right now. This is more for the doctor case, less for the entrepreneur case, but that gets entirely taxed at an unpreferential rate. And the other dimension I would add is that like it's the income tax, the taxation by itself is intrusive. It is the root of KYC. It is the beginning of the state being like, hey, you belong to me. And because of that, you have to proactively tell me what you've been doing. Anything that involves money, you basically need to tell me what's been going on, right? Otherwise, if you misstate these statements, we're going to like charge you penalties or we might even throw you in jail, right? So when you start from an affirmative standpoint of like, in order to run the state, you have to actually give as much information as possible. That's the beginning of really, you see this like KYC regime of like understanding, now you want to understand the entire banking system. You want to catch everybody who's committing quote unquote tax fraud or tax evasion and everything like that, right? It's a ready-made excuse to create that digital surveillance state across your finances and then across everything else pretty much. And that's only going to get worse in form and in practice with something like a wealth tax, because then you'll not only have to report what you earned that year, you actually have to report every asset that you've had, right? Including, for example, like if you have non-KYC Bitcoin or anything related to that. You would be put in a position where if you did not report that, that would be not compliant with the law, right? Right now, with an income tax system, that's not the case. You can have a stack, it can be non-KYC, and since you're not selling it for income, nobody really has to know, right? I mean, there are some filing conventions, like for example, if you own foreign assets or whatever, anyways. But in general, you don't really have to know. The state doesn't have to know that. But the wealth tax takes that another step further. And this is just kind of the directionality of it. It's like the tax, to me, what I've been telling people in my circle and even on like a couple of, in Bitcoin events and things like that, is that I don't actually have a huge issue with the rates. Honestly, like I'm able to structure the rates so that they're pretty even globally. Like there's ways where you can do that, right? Like you can get your money through a corp, and I don't spend a ton of cash, to be honest. So, I don't need to draw a lot of cash out for my day to day or anything like that. So there's a way to structure that where you're totally compliant, you're totally legal, but you have a lower effective rate. And that's because you choose to spend less or you choose to draw less, right? But I think that even with all these different rate differences being so slight, the big difference is really the privacy invasion. That's what really bothers me. It bothers me that the state like proactively inserts itself. And that's the part where I culturally don't vibe sometimes, especially with non-Bitcoiners. I think Bitcoiners have a more intuitive understanding of this. They understand that like, taxation is the state inserting itself into your life, right? Into some of your most intimate decisions. And I think non-Bitcoiners, sometimes they're like, oh, well, this is just a part of like modern society and we're willing to accept all these different things. And you're doing something wrong if you accept all these invasions of privacy. But like even in the 1970s and 80s, I mean, another thing that happened other than the gold standard dropping was that the banks in the United States were mandated to report suspicious activity in their systems to the government. And this was something that, they at the time thought was unconstitutional, but which we now, many people just accept as like a ready feature of life. So you have this crime called money laundering, right? And what is money laundering? Well, money laundering is acting in a way that makes it seem like you are disguising yourself from this financial surveillance apparatus. So that's how extreme it's gotten in a way. Like you can now be penalized even if you do not do anything criminal at all, in the sense of like anything. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer, but like let's just say like you're not like the money is totally derived from like a legitimate purpose. You run a business, you're adding value, you're getting paid. Um, you still could get dinged for even just like putting in transactions. Like, so for example, if you're skirting the $10,000 reporting line, right? And that in of itself, like basically proactively makes you kind of like a criminal if you try to confront the surveillance state. And we take all these things for granted, but even just 30 or 40 years ago, these are things that even the banks would refuse to do or question in court. So I think that to me is like the real big root of all evil, almost, I would say, is that taxation is that reason for the government to check in on you like every year. And it gives them a reason. And other people in the country usually are pretty sympathetic to that argument. They're like, oh, well, we want to make sure everybody's paying their taxes fairly. So yeah, we all just readily accept that our banks and our government are just monitoring every transaction we've ever made. And especially with the decreasing use of cash, and not as many people are using sats. I mean, I hope that they do, but not as many people right now are. Some of that is because of the capital gains stuff that we talked about. Of course, if we could have a de minimis exception, which I know Frank Corva, Bitcoin Mag, and the U.S. politics crew are trying to get out of the U.S. Hopefully that spreads in other countries. There are these things that can be helped with that, but in the meanwhile, you're really in a situation where there's more KYC, and that stems from that. So yeah, that might be like a good part to start winding down. I don't know if you have any final questions, Robin.
Yeah, we have gone long. I kind of overlooked the time, but yeah, it's an interesting question of like why do you tax me if you can print money? And then a lot of people are like, yeah, maybe because of privacy. Maybe they want the data and not actually the money. Maybe the data is more
control
valuable.
too.
Actually, the data, with the data then comes control and all those things. Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Yeah, I have like 50 more questions, but I guess we have to find an endpoint at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, well, you got your day and I got, yeah. And if you do get audited by your tax authorities, you can't blame me. Okay.
Yeah, let's make sure about that. We just have 2 more questions, as we always do in our end routine. The first question is always the same for every returning guest, and the question is, what have you learned outside of Bitcoin since your last appearance?
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about different. So I've just been reading a lot of different histories of different individual countries. So because of Bitcoin, I would say I've been able to visit so many different places. Like we mentioned Prague, we mentioned seeing each other in Vegas. I mean, that's not necessarily that new for me, but just we have a very interesting community, and you can kind of get around. So I've been actually picking out a book from each country I'm visiting, just to like learn a little bit more about the country. So when I went to Prague, I bought this book on the history of Central Europe and the Slavic Empire, and then of course your pride and joy, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which basically united all of Central Europe. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely learned a ton of things, but I think that's been something that's been kind of Bitcoin adjacent. Is I've been learning a lot about just individual countries. Because of the stablecoin stuff, I read a lot. This not just stablecoins, but also that was partly related to it. I was learning a lot about Iran's history, especially its recent history. It has a lot of parallels with China, actually. and was picking up books on Turkey. I finished a book on Turkey called The Modern Turk and other things. So that's I feel like I've gotten a little bit more even deeper into an appreciation of like different countries' histories, and not the kind of histories that are normally, like the big few, Russia, China, United States, United Kingdom, all that kind of stuff. But some of the more countries on the off the beaten path, and that's been because of Bitcoin actually, because most of the time it's because of either research I have to do or research that leads me to those threads, or I'm at a conference and I just literally normally pick up a book at every city I visit.
Yeah, it's so great. I love that question because it brings up so many interesting topics from all those Bitcoiners. Yeah, really cool. We have Andrew Teen, as you know from the previous from the previous conversation. We have Andrew Teen, where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest, without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asks you the question: in what ways has Bitcoin contributed to your spiritual and/or personal growth?
Is your last guest Scott?
No, that's not.
Yeah,
But it would have been a question that maybe he also asked.
yeah, he would have, or Seb might have also asked. Now the spiritual thing kind of set off those flags. Yeah, personal and spiritual growth. So let me start with the personal one because that's a little bit easier. I think Bitcoin has helped me. It's been the main topic of my writing research. It's really helped me crystallize thinking, analysis, really thinking through like a different lens, and debate and dialectic. And I think on a personal standpoint, like using the tool and really being able to navigate these different communities, it's just helped me develop personally like so much. And because of Bitcoin, I've had the opportunity to speak, right? And that's been something that's been relatively new for me. I've done a lot of writing in my life, but speaking has been relatively new because of the book. I was kind of running around, and I think I was doing like a bunch of different conferences and speaking, and so that is also kind of a personal development. On the spiritual side, I have to say that Bitcoin has regressed me significantly. No, okay. Yeah, I do think that because Bitcoin forces you to center the most important. A lot of our time and energy and life force is spent pursuing money. And so when you question what money is and what money does for you, I think there is a spiritual element to that. And I think that as I've constantly kind of questioned this in my life, instead of thinking about money as like a primary goal, and instead thinking about what are the things I want money to bring for me, Bitcoin helps with that lens because it totally reframes my thinking of money, right? I think that's helped me develop a little bit more spiritually in the sense of understanding like who I want to be, what I want to portray, and my ethos of the world and what kind of imprint I want to leave. So I'll leave that kind of vague, open-ended answer, and then I'm supposed to ask a question to the next guest, right?
Yeah, but you can do that later. If you have already one, you can already give it to me now. But I don't want to put my guests on the spot with coming up with a question. So I give them some time to think after the podcast if you want so.
Yeah. I forgot if I came up with it immediately on the show or if I did it after. But why don't we do this one after? Because you're talking to 1:21 a.m. Roger, and this is about.
Oh
is
man,
this
you're in Vancouver, right? You're like, wait, 7 hours. Are you 7 hours behind me? So yeah, for me it's like 10 a.m. and for you it's like very late at night. For me it's like the starting of the day. Man, I appreciate
we're
the
rocking it,
time.
man. We're rocking it, dude. No, don't worry about it, man. Like, and I always sleep late anyways, and so it's like just rocking in. I want to always big props to no, like I don't know, like man, you got like crazy energy. I could probably not do this like as often as you, but happy to have been on and just happy to have brought some energy in this.
Absolutely, I was appreciating it. Like really cool. I just you told me that you're from, like from the time frame, but I have not connected the dots. I was like, oh shit, you're 7 hours behind me. Yeah, like that means it's in the middle of the night for you right now.
Yeah, that's all good though. But that's also a Bitcoin thing. I mean, like for example, we had a podcast episode I was coordinating, and this was a fun one, by the way. I think you'll appreciate this as someone who books a lot of guests. we had PST, Hong Kong time, and Germany time. So the only time that could work was like, I think 6 a.m. PST. And then the Hong Kong person had to take a little bit of a sacrifice. I think it was like 10 or 11 p.m. their time.
Yeah, it's interesting because I usually never record at that time because people don't have time at that time, except the Australians usually. So because like they're all sleeping at that time. So I usually record between 1 p.m. European time to 8 p.m. European time, which is for most people really nice. Like the best time would be starting from like 2 p.m. Or like starting from like 1 p.m. towards to like, I don't know, 11 p.m. my time. So then I catch actually everyone. But I don't want to, like at some point I have to go to sleep also and stuff like that. I mean, I'm talking now to you that you are now at like 1 a.m. and I'm like, 8 p.m. I want to sleep. But
no, it's all good. It's all good. I mean, I was looking for it. I saw the time spots. I was like, this is the one that sings to me, and we'll do it. We'll do it. I just start getting a little incoherent around like now, but but other than that, hopefully all this is good.
And it's also longer than usual, like 1.5 hours. I usually record under 1.5 hours, so you got the lucky jackpot. But yeah, thank you so much, Roger, for being on my show and being such an amazing guest. And yeah, people go follow him, go check out his stuff because he was up at 1 a.m. for us. So I really appreciate that, Roger. And thank you so much for your time. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.
Robin, super pleasure to be on here.
This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.